Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the last episode, Detained, written by Patrick Ness and is directed by Wayne Yip. This would actually be Wayne Yip's first connection to the Doctor Who universe, as he would later go on to direct later episodes in the main series itself. Some, in fact, will be in series 10, which we are currently talking through. So that's really cool. That's really interesting. This is the first episode, which basically leads into the finale of the series, The Lost. With this story also taking place at the exact same time as the next episode. I believe it's called The Quantum Engine, off the top of my head, or what Quill did. And this episode, the one that we're talking about now, is actually a Quill light adventure. As this story is mainly focused on the kids. Now, before I begin, I want to talk about a particular type of episode in a TV series, mainly with the Doctor Who franchise. For you see, in most franchises, and especially television, there's always that kind of story, usually, hopefully, the fingers crossed, that proves the reason why this show or franchise needs to exist. And I feel like every incarnation of Doctor Who, as the point as I'm recording this, has an episode like that. Tom Baker's, of course, is Robot. David Tennant, for me anyway, is Jones and Smith. Matt Smith's one was Flesh and Stone and Time of Angels. And even the Doctor Who spin-offs have an episode like this. Countryside for Torchwood, and I'm trying to think. The Lost Boy from Sarah Jane Adventures is a really good episode, which really introduces a lot of great elements of the series. And one of the things about Class is you weren't expecting to have an episode like this. One of the things about Class as a franchise is that a lot of people just kind of looked at this and went, huh? Why are we following these characters who weren't even introduced in Doctor Who and have nothing really apart from the fact that it has Cohill School? It's actually Cohill Academy now, but that's beside the point. I don't understand they changed that. There probably is a reason if somebody can talk to me in discussions. So yeah, and it just felt kind of random, kind of just, let's just put things together. As well as there's not being much of a focus and not much of an emphasis on story beats and characters. Of course, the series, as you've been watching throughout my vlog, have actually been a very good job at least for the most part, showing us great character beats and developments. It's just a shame that majority of the stories don't really feel meted in its adventure. However, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Detained is Class peak franchise, kind of like it has that episode. When you watch this episode, at least for me anyway, I know a lot of people like the one next after and consider it like that. But this is the first story in the series where I was kind of like, oh wow, I'm actually really invested and I'm really intrigued with these characters, and it's a great premise for an episode as well. We'll get into that when we start talking about the episode, but it's just such a great, I love stories like this where it's very minimal and it really pushes our characters into a certain mindset where everybody's just tearing each other apart. I don't know, maybe I'm gonna say this, but I love episodes like this. I mean, it brings back memories of Blink, Heaven Sent. This is essentially classed as Heaven Sent on a much, 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 much cheaper budget, as we'll see. Essentially a bottle episode, which is kind of nuts. Like, Class even has a bottle episode. It's only like, if I remember correctly, 7 episodes long. I could be wrong. Or maybe 6. I could be completely wrong on that. I do apologize. But anyway, like you wouldn't expect Class to have an episode like this. And it's actually, when after watching this episode, I did kind of realize, it's like, yeah, it is actually a big shame that Class didn't go further with Series 2, which was planned but was quickly cancelled after the failed success of Series 1, as well as maybe having some Doctor Who crossover. Maybe some of these characters could have appeared in Doctor Who. It was this episode right here which made me kind of disappointed that we didn't get more class. Sorry about that. But anyway, what is the premise? Essentially, we see that Quill has basically summoned all of our kids in detention. She has put it into her mindset that she's actually using this to protect Charlie. So the creature inside her head, which Charlie has used to basically enslave her, doesn't affect, because she's technically doing this to protect him. But he actually, well, as we quickly learn throughout this episode, he has claustrophobia. He doesn't like small spaces, and it's dealt very realistically and it's very well handled. So all these classes are just stuck in this small room, and they were like, okay, maybe Quill will just put attention for a few minutes, maybe an hour or so, half an hour, and then we'll go and do our like normal day things. Only in the space, the rip in the space-time continuum, which haunts Coal Hill Academy, suddenly peeks out a stone, an asteroid, which throws itself into the class and actually breaks it out of space-time, basically putting it in its own pocket universe, this class. And the entire episode is basically the class realizing what's happening and trying to work out what's happening. As well, with the stone that brought them here, they basically learned that when they touch it, they have this kind of flashback of them basically emitting a truth, only to then, at the moment, to reveal a truth to the gang, something that they keep hidden for the rest of the crew. For example, the first character to touch it is Tanya. Vivian Ofra, I think this is actually one of her standouts in the series after the dream creature. I can't remember what it's called. The Nightshade. This one is actually really good. But basically, we learn that she has this kind of memory of her admitting to her mother, only for them to basically admit a truth to the gang, which starts tearing them apart, in which she basically tells them that she doesn't see them as friends. They basically look down at her as if like she's a little sister, because she is the youngest of the crew. Essentially, that we learn in the first episode that she was brought up a few years in her classes because she was just so smart. She was just that big-brained, and our class members are trying to encourage her, trying to speak with her, trying to, it's like, no, we do see you as equals to us. I don't know where this mindset is coming from, but the more characters discuss and debate and have disagreements, and every time someone disagrees with Tanya, it kind of enforces those fears about herself. And though it does kind of get shallowed-lined because of all of the other stuff that the other characters are dealing with, I think here it's actually dealt very well handled, and it's actually pretty cool. The next character to touch the stone is Mateus, Charlie's boyfriend, and he basically sees a flashback of his grandmother, and he basically admits to her that he's a homosexual, only for them to reveal a truth, and that is, though he loves Charlie, even though he adores him, he's absolutely terrified of him as well, as he is an alien, and he isn't bound by human prominence. And this really just gets to Charlie, because he's, at this moment in the story, he's basically suffering from anxiety. He's not really coping very well with the small space. He's kind of like trying to breathe, and there's literally no way, he physically cannot get out of this space. And Mateus is actually one of the characters that he can rely on, he can trust on. It's one of the few people in the class that he really does rely on. And he basically admits that he doesn't trust him to a certain degree. He's terrified of him. Mateus actually has his best role here. I do feel it's a kind of a shame, because Throughout the series, I have felt like he's the weakest link. There's not really much to him other than his relationship with Charlie. I feel like if you took the Charlie aspect out of it, what do we know about him? Who is this person? Like, ugh. But here is actually one of the few scenes. In fact, the story actually he's kind of one of the main central focuses in the story. And Jonathan Renzo, who plays Mateas, does a really good job here, and he really sails this kind of, I do love you, I do care for you, and it was the stone that made me say it. And though I do, yes, it's true, I'm terrified of you. It's not all the time, it's not constant, it's just few moments. But Charlie is like, yeah, but that's still enough. I don't want to make you feel any sort of uncomfort. And now to learn that you're absolutely terrified of me because I'm not human, it goes a long way into the character's development. And the fact that only 2 characters so far have touched the stone, and the story is pushing each other a long way. The third character to touch the stone is Ram. Now, throughout the episode, Ram has been getting a bit tense. He's getting a bit angry, particularly with the way April has been treating him. They do have this kind of lovey relationship, but they're also kind of spreading apart, if that makes any sense. And he's always been the kid that's cared more about himself and his appearance and what he projects himself to others than what the small group of team are. He's mainly the more outsider in terms of his own perception of his own self. And like, he's the sports guy, and he kind of see him as the dummy, but he's smart as well. He does kind of work out certain elements of the story as well. And so he picks up the rock, and we essentially learn at this point as well that the stone is holding a sentient creature. It has a creature inside it, and it's actually a prison. And the prison for a creature which can basically, it wants to die essentially, because this prison immortalizes. And the only way you can do that is essentially if somebody can just confesses all their guilt to the point where it has nothing to confess off. And so Ram confesses that he's in love with April. He absolutely adores April, but he knows for a fact that she can never love him the same. And it really does tear the relationship. And you can kind of see that April was also kind of hesitant at this point to pick up the stone, because she kind of knows what's going to come out. And he puts himself in a very vulnerable position here, probably the most vulnerable out of all the characters in this story, where he's basically confessed himself here. He's like, yes, I will love you, but I know for a fact that you can hurt me as soon as you can. Like, Ram is easily one of the most interesting characters in the series of Class. And Fadia Slade. I completely butchered that name. I really do apologize. But he does some really great acting here, some really great pieces of dialogue. I like the bit where he has one of those. Do you remember those toys that you used to have in science classes, which you can, like a ball, and can pull it up? I like how he puts his head in one of them at one point, where like he's just thinking because he just can't cope with it going around. He's also becomes more antagonistic to other characters, particularly Charlie and Mateas, who seem to take control of the situation. Where, usually he's the control. He is the football boy. And as well, the characters trying to work out like how to defeat this creature and how to get out. And it's at this point then where the fourth character, April, picks up the stone. And we essentially learn from the creature, it's ascended, it's becoming more stronger. The voice actually comes out and is trying to get it to confess. And at this point, April admits she doesn't love Ram. or at least not like definitely not as enough as he likes her, and she's afraid that she never will. Now later on in the episode, she does try and like comfort him in this, and it's like, just because I don't love you now doesn't mean I can't learn to love you. But that's just a horrible, not a thing to say, because she is trying to comfort him, and it does kind of work, from her perspective. But can you imagine it from Ram's perspective? That is an absolute gut punch, and the story handles it so well, so narratively instructed. And Sophie Hopkins, who plays April, who I find, looking back, she might have been a bit giddy, a bit weak, not weak, but in terms of acting, not much to do. And throughout the series, she gets more and more, especially in the two Heart episodes that we had previously. Here, she really gives up her A game here, and essentially it feels like they can't defeat them. There's only one option left. There's only one person left to pick up the stone. But they also learn as well that the stone is also making them aggressive. They also learn as well that basically they've been immortalized in this non-space, non-time dimension, and they will essentially not age. They will not need to feed. They will stuck here forever. Charlie's worst nightmare. Speaking of Charlie, there's a great scene where he opens the door into the black, endless void, and with absolute, his heart is racing. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He puts his hand through the vortex, and his hand just comes out the door again like that. And it's a really simple but a really cool effect. And though there's not much of a budget here in this episode, you can clearly tell that this was the episode to try and save the budget. But honestly, I think this episode has got the perfect, I can't imagine this story needing more special effects, needing more stuff than what we got here. It's a simple effect, but it really works. And so the story ends with Charlie, in terms of the narrative, Charlie picks up the stone, but before that, he basically confesses to everybody that, yeah, I do feel different, I do feel strange. Yes, I love Mateus as much as anybody, and in my culture as well, the action of thinking about something is basically the same as if you did it. And he confesses that he just wants to murder every single Shadow King, the creatures which destroyed his race, leaving him as the last survivor of his species. It grits him to this core. It absolutely pains him and it suffocates him, but he does despise the Shadow King. Now this again ties into the story, and I feel like this is one of the weaker elements of the story. It's literally just a scene, but it does kind of go, hey, look, remember the rest of the series. I do feel like a better ending would have just been him realizing to Mateus it's he loves him more than anything, but he might have been sick with the fact that he's afraid of him, and there's awkward relationships, and maybe he can confess something with the rest of the crew. But bringing it to the Shadow King, kind of go, story arc, but it's literally just a scene, and it does still work in the character. But the fact it's literally just a scene, it comes in and out of the narrative flow. It doesn't really click in. That's literally just a few seconds of dialogue. That's it. That's the only thing I would change. And because he's basically confessed everything, he has no truths to reveal. He basically destroys the creature inside the stone prison, and they basically warp back into the class just as they left. However, the prison needs a new prisoner. I don't know how that works. It's just a kind of a clumsy way to basically get into the final cliffhanger ending. But I don't know, it's pretty cool. You see the tentacles of the stone trying to grab Charlie, and he's growing, and then suddenly, blast, as Miss Quill enters. But she seems strange. She seems weird. Her hair is longer. She's got a scar on her face. And she seems to be a bit more disorientated, shall we say? And she basically reveals that during the time when the class members were off in this adventure, she had her own adventure, and she actually got the creature in her brain out. And she is a free woman. She is a free warrior who can do whatever she wants. And that is the cliffhanger leading into her version of this episode, her alternate cut, shall we say. And that is Detained. In my opinion, it is easily the best episode by Class. But not just like it's the best episode of Class, but it's a really good episode. If this was in Doctor Who, it would still, like, it would hold up very well. And, like, it's surprisingly how good this episode is. And it actually makes me go and recommend Class just so you can watch this episode. I don't know if it'll have the same feel. Again, it really depends on how you treat characters. Like, if you need to the previous episodes to get you engaged, then maybe not. But if you can get into this series, you may need to watch a few episodes to get some of the character beats. But when you get to here, I feel like, yeah, I would watch Class Series 2 any day after watching this episode. And this episode basically proves the concept of Class and gives each character in its episode, especially the kids. It's the only really episode in the series, in my opinion, that gives Mateus anything really of a character, revealing his fears, as we also learn a little bit more about him and his antagonistic with Ram and the rest of the crew. All great drama, as well as Tanya, April, Ram, Charlie. Just so many great moments, so many great scenes. Highly recommended. So anyway, that is Detained from Class. So join me next time when the Doctor helps Bill get a new landlord. But something is strange about this figure. And also he looks kind of familiar. So join me next time for Knock, Knock. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.